Hi everyone, and welcome to week 2. This is Veronica. So I'm looking forward today to showing you how to use some of the basic functions on Excel. And this is going to set us up for what comes in the coming weeks. So we're going to be looking at modeling, forecasting, analysing financial statements, and we're going to be using Excel quite a lot for doing those things. But it's also going to be important for you to be able to replicate the functions that I show you here in your assignment later on. So luckily we're using these recordings this session, so you should be able to pause the recording where you need to and to practice it yourself, and then maybe to go back and re-listen to some of the parts that you need to. So it might be useful for you here to have the recording open on one half of your screen and to open up a new Excel sheet on the other side and just try these functions as I do show them to you. All right, so you can see that I have here a blank spreadsheet. And if you're using spreadsheets in the workplace later on, which is very likely, you will probably be creating lots of different spreadsheets. So for example, you might want to be setting up a spreadsheet for each company that you're analysing. And so there's going to need to be a structured way that you organize your spreadsheets and make them useful and easy for you to find, but also easy for any users to find information as well. So the very first step that I'm going to do is to create a title page. So if you can see, I'm down the bottom of the spreadsheet here, just at this tab that says Sheet 1, and I'm just going to rename this. So I'm just right-clicking here, and I can see in the menu it says Rename, and I'm going to name this the title page. So that's a good first step to get started. Now on this title page, we're going to need a title, and we're going to want to have some details like the date that this was created, the author, any other documentation that might be appropriate for this particular spreadsheet. So I'm going to do that here. So I'm just going to first of all give it a title. And in this spreadsheet, I'm going to be showing you how to do a mortgage repayment schedule. So I'm just going to call it Mortgage Payment Analysis. All right, so I'm just giving it a name there. And I'm going to put some other details in here as well, like the date and the author, and maybe some identifying information. So for your purposes, when you're doing this in your assignment, I'm going to be asking you to put your student ID in as part of this title page. And if this was something that you're doing for work, then there might also be some documentation that you might want to put on the title page for extra information. Right, so let's say you were doing this maybe to analyse different companies. So maybe we're working for a bank and we're looking at the mortgage repayment schedule for various companies. So we might even use some kind of colour coding system here too. So we might use, highlight this in red if it's a company that, is maybe not going so well, or it might be green if it's a company that is doing well. So there may be some kind of colour coding as well on this title page. All right, so I'm just going to make a couple of these columns a little bit wider here, right? Just to fit all of this in. So the first thing that I'm going to enter here is the date. Now the date today while I'm recording this lecture is the 29th of July 2021. So I can just put in the basic details there and press enter. Now notice that Excel has recognized that as a date and it has slightly changed the format for me here. Now I might not like that format. I might want a different format for my date. So I could right click here and I get this menu, and down here I can format the cells, right? So if I go to number, right, you can see that Excel has recognized it as a date, or I could change it to something else if I wanted to. So there are various formats here for the date, but I'm pretty happy now that I've looked at the alternatives. I actually like the default one that it gave me, so I'm just going to keep that one and click OK. I'm going to type my name in as the author. Now, for your assignment, you'll put your student ID, but I'm just going to put a random one in here. I'm just going to keep it as 8 digits here for a student ID. Now, if you've used Excel before, you're probably already familiar with all the different formatting functions that you have. If not, you can practice with this. I'm just going to, for all of the headings or labels, I'm just going to make them bold. Right, for the information that I've inputted here, I want to line that up. So you can see here I could align it to the left or to the center or to the right. I'm just going to align everything to the right there. And I'm also just going to highlight in orange here just the parts that require an input. Okay, so there's some basic information to get us started. So what I'd like to do now is to look at a couple of different functions that are going to be useful for us. So I'm just going to type them over here. So one function that we're going to explore in a moment is called the mid function. And I'm also going to be showing you a column function as well, right? So they're the two main ones that I'm going to consider in this recording here. So a situation where I might want to use this mid function is, let's say I'm looking at this string of numbers in this student ID. So we have 8 digits here in this student ID. And let's say I want to spread that out over several cells. So let's say I wanted to take these 8 cells below and separate that student number with 1 digit in each of those cells. So I want 4 in the first cell, 1 in the second cell, 2 in the third cell, and so on. Well, a function we can use here to help us to do that is this mid function. So I'm just going to go to the cell where I want the series to start, okay, and I would label this cell C7. Right, so in Excel, each cell has a reference. So the column reference is C and the row reference is 7 here. So I've gone to cell C7. I'm putting an equal sign in here, and the equal sign tells Excel that I'm about to type a formula or I'm going to use a function, right? So it's getting ready to accept some kind of instruction here. So here, I'm just going to type that word mid, and I'm going to open up brackets. Now, what this mid function is asking me for, it's asking me for 3 variables, right? And the first one is text. So it's asking me, where is the information that we're going to be referring to? And I wanted to refer to cell C6 here because that's where the information is that we're referring to. So I'm just going to click on that. And that's going to be the first variable that we have. So I'm telling Excel to look in that cell for the information. I'm going to put a comma in, and that will then take me to the second piece of information that we need. And what it's asking us for here is the start number. So in other words, which digit do we want in this cell? And what I want is the first digit in that string. I want the number 4. So I'm going to put number 1 here because I'm telling Excel that I want the first digit. Then I'll put in another column, and then it's asking me for the number of characters. So how many of these numbers? So we've told them I want to start from number 4, but how many of these digits do we want? Well, I only want one number in each of these cells. So I'm going to put 1 here for the number of characters. And then I'm going to close the brackets and I'm going to click enter. So you can see that it has picked out the number 4, which is the first digit in that string. And it has only given me 1 digit there, which is exactly what I wanted. Now I want to try to have that same formula in each of these remaining cells, right? So for 8 cells, I want 1 of these digits. Now I could copy, right? Could copy and paste that and make changes, right? Could do that, but I want to take shortcuts wherever I can. So a good way to copy a formula across is to just click on the starting cell there, and you'll notice there's this little box in the bottom right-hand corner. If I hover my mouse over that, then I can see that the mouse turns into a solid black cross. And so if I click my mouse and just drag that across, I think that's 8 cells there. Yeah. So if I click that across, ideally, what I want is for the formula to be copied across. And what I really wanted was to see one figure for each of these, this string that I have, and it hasn't quite worked. So we need to figure out what the problem is. Why hasn't this worked? So if I click on a cell here, I can see that there are contents in the cell. It has actually copied the formula across, but there's no output in the cells, right? And in all of these cells, I can see up here in the formula bar, I can see that there are contents, but what's wrong? All right, well, let's just have a closer look at what's in here. So remember, when I was entering my information to get that number 4, I wanted the cell to refer to this string that is in cell C6. But when I copied this across into the next cell, notice that it is now referring to D6 instead of C6. This is what we call a relative reference. And it's happened all the way across. So if I click on the next one, it's referring to the cell E6 instead of C6. So of course, there are no contents in E6. So therefore, obviously, this formula is going to give me 0 output because there's 0, it's referring to the wrong cell. So this is where we're going to be introduced to the concepts of absolute and relative references. So what you've just seen there is a relative reference, which is not what we want in this situation. So let's have a look at this concept a little more. I'm just going to show you a little demonstration. I'm just going to put a series of numbers in here. I'll just make it a little bit smaller. So I want numbers up to 10. And notice I've just put my first 3 numbers in, and I want to take a bit of a shortcut. I want it to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But rather than typing all of those numbers in separately, if I type 3 of them in, Excel is going to recognize that series. And if I copy this across, it is going to, let me just make it a bit smaller, it's going to automatically complete that series. All right, now I'm just going to do another series below just because I want to demonstrate a few things to you here. All right, so I'm just going to do the same thing here, just continue that series there. All right, now I'm just going to use these as numbers for an example. So first of all, let's just look more closely at this concept of relative referencing. So if I, for example, was to select this first cell here, which is cell L10. All right, and I click enter. You can see that it has copied whatever is in cell L10. And if I was to copy this across, notice what's happening. So in my next cell, it's referring to what's in M10. So what Excel is doing here is saying, okay, well, it's recognized that I've moved across a cell. So it is now giving me a reference to the cell in that same column. Okay, and it has done that all the way across. Now, I also want to get that second row in. So let me show you what happens here. If I select those numbers and I just copy that down, you can see that these are also relative references. So if I click on this one, what Excel has noticed is that we have now moved down a row and across to a different column. So it's giving me a relative reference there. All right, so that's the default. That's what's going to happen when we copy cells across or down. But as we just saw with our student number, sometimes we don't want that to happen. Sometimes we want to use an absolute reference. So let's demonstrate this one. So if I again just put in my equals sign and click on the first number in this series. Now what I want to do is to make sure that every other cell here keeps referring to L10. Now there's a couple of ways to do this, right? So this is one way. If we put a $ in front of the column reference, which is L, and a $ in front of the row reference, which is 10, and then press enter. Now, when I copy this across, notice what happens. Every cell here, if I just click on that one, every cell is now referring back to cell L10. So by putting a $ in, it's keeping the column fixed and it's keeping the row fixed. So every other cell now is going to keep that reference. Notice what happens if I just copy this down into the second row. Even though I've moved down a row, it has still kept that same column and row reference. All right, so that's enabling me to fix both the column and the row. Now there is a shortcut for this as well, so you can manually put in that $, but you can use some shortcut keys as well. So if you're using Windows, you can use the key F4. If you're using a Mac, it's going to be, so two keys you're going to press, and that is Command and T, right? So Command and T will do that on a Mac for you. So there's a little shortcut, but that's going to enable you to keep both the column and the row fixed in your references. Now I want to show you a couple of variations on this. All right, let me show you something a little bit different. So if I put my equals sign in, and again, I'm just going to that first cell, right? Now let's say I want to fix my column, right? So I want to fix the column, but I want to allow the row to move. So I can fix the column by putting a $ in next to the L, and I want all of my cells to keep referring back to that same column, but I want to allow the row to change. All right. Now, incidentally, if you're very new to Excel, what I've just done there to see that formula, right, I just double clicked here and that gave me my formula that I can change. Otherwise, you can go up to the formula bar up here and make your changes up here. Okay. All right. So I've done that. Now let's see what happens. Notice what's happening here. So in each of these cells, it's keeping the column fixed. And because we're still in the same row, it has also just kept referring back to that, to to cell L10. But let's see what happens here. If I copy that down, notice what's happened here. So because Excel has seen that I've changed rows, I've moved down a row and I've allowed the row to change, you can see here that it has kept the column fixed, right? So it's kept column L, but it has changed to row 11. All right, and you can see that here. So it's still referring to column L because we kept it fixed, but it has, because we've shifted down a row, it has changed the row reference. And we can do it the other way as well. So let me start again. So if I refer back to our original cell here, L10, what about if we allow the column to move, but we keep our row fixed? Let's see what happens here when I copy that across. All right. So what's happening here? It is now keeping the row the same, but it is allowing the column to move, right? So now it's a relative reference for whatever is in that column. Let's see what happens when we move this down. So see what's happening there? We kept the row fixed, remember? All right, so the row has the $sign. So even though I've moved down, it's still referring to row 10. But the columns are relative. Okay, so it's shifting the columns across. So we're getting different results here depending on whether we fixed the column or we fixed the row. Now, that's getting a little bit complicated, and we don't really need to know those complications just yet. You will need to know them later, right? So later in our modeling, we're going to be using this copy function a lot because we're going to use similar functions for similar calculations. So we're going to be copying a lot, and sometimes we're going to want to fix the row, sometimes we're going to want to fix the column. So that's going to be later, but we're going to do plenty of practice at that. So you don't need to know how to do that just yet. But what I do want you to know at this stage is the difference between a relative and an absolute reference. All right, so let's go back to our original problem. So we're trying to separate these digits in our student ID. We had our problem up here where when I copied that across, it wasn't really working. And now we know why, because each cell was referring to the cell above it in the same column. So now we know we want to fix both the column and the row in this reference. So we want every cell to refer to column C and row 6. All right, so now when I do copy this across, every cell is going to refer back to C6. All right, let's give that a try. Okay, well, at least every cell is still referring back to C6, but we still have a problem that we need to fix. Because remember, what I want is one cell in each number. Sorry, let me start again. One number in each cell. And that is not what's happened. I don't just want a row of 4s. So why is this happening? All right, well, we've dealt with the first variable here in our brackets, but the reason we still have a problem is because we've told Excel to keep referring back to the first number in the string. So every cell keeps referring back to this number 4. But what we want to happen is for each cell to refer to a different number in the string. Now, this is where I'm going to use this column function. Right, so I'm just going to, I've already dealt with the first one, the text function there. Now I want to think about this start number, and I want that to change in each cell. So I'm going to type in the word column. All right, so this is after the comma here. I'm typing in the word column and I'm just going to go open brackets, close brackets. And now it's going to require me to put in which column do we want to refer to. So at the moment, you can see, in fact, you know what? I'm just gonna I'm gonna do it in the first one. Okay, so let me just, yeah, we'll just fix it. I just want to enter and I just want to get rid of that. All right, I'm actually just going to delete all of this and start again. I want to do this here. All right, for my first one. So let me start again. So we fixed the C6. We are typing in the word column. I'm going to open brackets and close brackets. And what I was just saying is I'm going to get rid of that one because I want this to change according to the column that I'm in. So notice when we're in the third column, which is column C, the position of the digit that I wanted was position number 1. I wanted the first digit when I was in column 3. So if I'm in column 3, the digit that I wanted to read is 3 minus 2, right? So at the moment, I'm in column 3, which is column C. I want this cell to read the first digit, and the first digit is 3 minus 2. 3 minus 2 equals 1. And I'm going to enter. So it's still giving me the right digit here. It's the first digit, which is column 3 minus 1. Now, look at what happens when I drag this across. Now it works, right? Now it's reading the correct figure in the string. So if I look at what's in here, I can see that it's telling me I'm in the 4th column, right? So that's my column number. And if I subtract 2, that's going to give me the second digit in the string, which is number 1. All right, if I go to this one, row F, that's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th column, right? So I'm in column number 6, minus 2 gives me digit number 4. So it should be finding that number 3 in there, and it is. All right, so that's the column function. So it's reading which column we're in, and we're telling it to give me the digit in this sequence that is this column number minus 2. So what I've just shown you there is the mid function and the column function. We've looked at relative and absolute referencing, right? So these are all things you're going to need to use. Now, something else I want to show you while we're still on the title page is how to protect your page. So let's say you don't want the user to change anything, right? So you want them to be able to read it, but not to change any content on your sheet. Let's have a look at this. So what I'm going to do is go down to the name of the sheet, and I'm going to right click. And notice it says here in the menu, protect sheet. So it's asking me for a password. So we'll make up a password here. I'm just going to use 1, 2, 3, 4 here. But then, of course, you want to write that down somewhere so you don't forget it, because if you want to make changes, you're going to have to use that password. Now, have a look. It's got 2 boxes ticked as a default here. So this is what we're going to allow the users to do. So we're going to allow them to select cells and select unlocked cells. So we're going to allow them to view what's in the cells, maybe to look at what the contents are, but we're not going to allow them to make any changes. But you can select anything here that will allow them to do more things if you want. Right, for this demonstration, I'm just going to keep those 2 default ones there. So I'm going to click OK. And it's asking me to enter my password again. And it's advising me to keep that recorded somewhere. So I'll click OK. All right, so now let's say I want to try and change something like the date. I'm going to double click on that cell and I'm going to get a warning, right? It says it's protected. If I want to make a change, I have to enter a password. Okay, so that means no one can change anything here. Right now, how do I unprotect it? Well, we go to the same place. So back to the name, down the bottom, right click, and we can unprotect the sheet. It's going to ask me for my password again, which I'll put in, and OK. So now, yep, I can change anything I want. Okay, so everything is now unprotected. Maybe we want to only protect part of this sheet. So let's say we just want to allow the user to enter information into these highlighted cells, but we don't want them to change anything else. Right, so you can see here that I've selected the cells that I want them to be able to change or to edit. I right click, I go to format cells. Right, I should see my menu here. For some reason that's not coming up. I might try that again. So I'm going to right click on format cells. I'm not sure why that doesn't want to work. Try one more time. There we go. Third time's a charm. All right, so we go to format cells and we're going across to protection. All right, now you can see that it already has a tick in locked. We're going to untick that. So what we're telling Excel here is that when I lock this sheet again, so when I protect it, I want these cells that I've chosen to be unlocked. All right, so I've unticked lock and OK. So now I'm going to go back and protect the sheet again. Right, so go back to what we did before. So down here, protect the sheet, put my password in, click OK, re-enter my password, click OK. So now everything is locked, right? I can't change anything. If I double click on this, it's telling me it's locked. But if I click on one of these ones, I can change it. So by unlocking these three cells, it has enabled me to edit these three cells, but nothing else. All right, so we can do a partial protection as well. All right, one more thing I want to show you here, and that is the formatting of this date. Now, sometimes you want to keep that date fixed, right? So you might want to look back at this sheet sometime later and see what was the date that it was created. But other times you might want this date to automatically show today's date, right? I might want to access it later and I want this to automatically show that date. Now, it's not always going to be the case that you want to do that. It depends on the circumstances, because if you allow it to have today's date, then Excel won't be able to tell you what date it was created. So you be selective with when you want to do this. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the function today. So I'm going to put an equal sign in and I'm going to type the word today. All right, and I'm just going to open brackets and close brackets. All right, and when I press enter, it is going to give today's date, and that is going to update. So if I look at it tomorrow, it's going to show the 30th. All right, so every time that's opened, it will update the date. Okay, All right, guys, so they are the functions I just wanted to show you in this part of the recording. So we've looked at the mid function, the column function, we've looked at relative and absolute referencing, we've looked at protecting the worksheet and also formatting the date. All right, so I'll see you in the next spreadsheet where we will start having a look at constructing a mortgage payment schedule. Thanks, everyone.